Welcome back, everyone. We're here at CPAC, sitting down with Ken Paxton. He's the Attorney General in Texas. And Ken, real pleasure having you on.
Hey, I really appreciate it.
And so, Ken, you've been kind of leading the push against these different, laws that are being pushed down from the White House that are deemed unconstitutional. I know you just won a pretty big case when it comes to Biden's deportation restrictions. Can you tell us about this?
Sure. So, as your viewers are probably aware, there were lots of executive orders issued on the first day by the Biden administration, and on the third day we sued them over one of those, and that was the executive order that said that they were not going to enforce immigration laws as it related to deporting illegals. So we sued them. On the third day, we sued them, and then the sixth day, we got an injunction. We now have a permanent injunction, which happened this week, so that they still have to enforce federal law and deport people. They can't just let people cross the border and not deport them if they catch them. So we're hopeful that means we have a very good chance of winning at trial when that comes up.
And what was the constitutional basis of you taking that move?
So it was actually a couple of things. We actually had part of it that was not constitutional. We had an agreement with the Department of Homeland Security that if they changed anything in immigration law that was significant, that they would inform us and give us notice. They did not do that. Second, federal law requires that they do this, so we're suing under federal law. And then third, the president doesn't have the authority under the Constitution to change federal law without Congress doing it. So we had actually several bases for suing the Biden administration.
The other big thing we see happening right now is Texas and now Florida are pushing back against big tech and pushing back in ways that kind of hold them accountable for censorship. Can you tell us how this is working right now?
Yeah, so we actually sued Google, and we've got an investigation of Facebook, Twitter, after what happened to the president, Twitter, Apple, and some other large technology companies. And our Google lawsuit is based on antitrust, that they control the entire advertising market, nearly the entire advertising market on the internet, and that consumers are not aware that their costs are higher because of that searching is not free. There's actually a great cost to consumers for using the internet. And second, that their private information is being used in ways that they don't know, that their personal information, their financial information, their healthcare information. Google has a lot of information on people they're not even aware of themselves, and we're trying to stop that.
And what is the details of this? You say you're launching an investigation. I assume you already have some information to launch that investigation.
So with Google, we actually have a lawsuit. We filed a lawsuit in December, and that's on its way. We also have an investigation of the other 5 companies related to the whole issue of the president being deplatformed from Parler by Amazon and Twitter and Facebook and Google and Apple.
And what's the basis of that? When it comes to censorship, I know I've talked to people and they argue, well, it's not really suppression of free speech, not suppression of our First Amendment protections because these are private companies. What would you say to that? What's the basis?
Here's what I'd say is that because there's a monopoly in with these companies, that they control the entire platform, and so there is no other choice other than these companies. So they're like a utility company that we regulate, and we say, hey, you have to provide power to everybody because you're the only choice. So yeah, normally I'd say you're right. Private company can do what they want, and consumers have choices. Here, consumers don't have a choice. They have no choice, and so we have to regulate that and make sure that free speech is not being controlled by a few very wealthy tech people.
Now, another big concern people have right now in this country is the gun restrictions being pushed through the Biden administration, and things maybe more extreme than most people were even expecting. I think people were maybe expecting, red flag laws. This is actual restrictions of what he's deeming as assault weapons, and even removing legal protections, for example, for gun manufacturers, meaning they can be sued for selling guns, for making guns. Is Texas planning to do anything on this?
So nothing's passed yet. We would have to wait until something's passed. We would look at it, and if we viewed it as a violation of the Constitution, the Second Amendment, yeah, we're very likely we would take action and file a lawsuit in Texas to protect people's Second Amendment rights. This is very important to the founders because they were always worried that government would own all the guns, and therefore that people would be exposed to great risk from their own governments. They always wanted people to be able to defend themselves against their own government. And so here we are, the government trying to take away the ability of people to get guns, not ones maybe they already have, but maybe future purchases by limiting how guns are produced.
And this brings up a big discussion in terms of, where does state law end and where does federal law begin? Because now we see the federal government really exercising a lot more power than they really have before. Where do you see this balance being?
So the founders were very clear. They gave specific enumerated powers under the Constitution to the federal government. Everything else was left to the states. And what has happened, and probably we're well beyond what the founders ever intended, and that's all started under FDR back in the 30s. Everything else is supposed to be in state power. So we're constantly having to use the 10th Amendment to push back on the federal government because they want to take more than they deserve and more than they're entitled to under the Constitution.
And can you explain to our viewers how you're using the 10th Amendment? What is the basis?
So the 10th Amendment basically says what I said. All rights are reserved to the states that are not specifically granted to the federal government. And so if it's not specifically granted to the federal government, we have a right to sue them and say, you can't do this. You can't take this responsibility from us. This is our decision, not yours.
And a lot of people are waiting now to see whether Biden packs the court as well, packs the Supreme Court. If that happens, what's going to happen to Texas?
So I don't know, because I don't know how he would do it. I'm hopeful that, the Senate would stop that. I think it would take, 60 votes to do it, to undo the filibuster. So hopefully that will not happen. That would be bad for the future of our country. There's no reason for there to be more than 9 justices. That's the most we've ever had. That's more than I think most Supreme Courts have across the country, and it's really unnecessary unless you're just trying to skew results.
And now, what can we expect from Texas going forward in terms of pushing back against laws that are deemed, say, unconstitutional or overly overstepping the boundaries?
As long as we have the resources to do it, we'll be fighting that tooth and nail going forward. Anything that we view as being done by the federal Constitution that affects our state and the country, we'll fight back on.
And I'm curious as well, if you've been hearing much from other states. We know Florida has followed you on the pushing back against big tech.
Yes.
Have you heard other states as well kind of following Texas's lead on pushing back?
Yeah, we've had several states join us across the country on our Google lawsuit. And we're hopeful that as we go forward, we're going to be talking about this in the next week or so, about how we're going to deal with the Biden administration as they continue to overreach their responsibility and their duties under the Constitution.
And just last question here. If you were to tell people one thing about Texas and kind of why you're taking the stand against this policy, some people just view it, I think, as a partisan issue. What would you tell them?
Are you talking about immigration? Or
when it comes to immigration, big tech, different policies, I think some people view it as a partisan conflict. What would you tell them?
I would tell them the Constitution is bigger than Democrat, Republican. It's bigger than any particular state. It's about our freedom, and our founders set up a very brilliant system that put checks and balances on all elected officials. And so if we start violating those and we start saying, oh, well, we like this policy, we'll let the president just change the law. Well, guess what? If the president can change policies that you like, he can also change policies that you don't like, and then we've lost our say in our government. That's not the way the democracy was set up. And so it's very important that the process be followed the way it's supposed to. Whether you like the policies or not, the most important thing is that they're done the way that the founders set it up, the Constitution's followed, so that our freedoms continue.
Hey, Ken Paxton, real pleasure having you on Crossroads.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.